tap. Put me in couch. Uh, excellent. So, like I said, we're talking about The Girl with All the Gifts from 2016, and it is about a scientist and a teacher living in a dystopian future embark on a journey of survival with a special young girl named Melanie, and it's directed by Colm McCarthy and adapted from the book of the same name, written by Mike Carey. Um, so, like I said, it's based on the book, which is going like I'm going to talk about that at the end of this section about like how different the interpretations can be because of certain decisions that were made regarding casting in
Yeah.
this film versus like how things were portrayed in the book, and the fact that like there's also this whole other level as like us as Americans viewing it because it does take
Uh-huh.
place in England, so there's like a whole different like tone and theme that it's covering that like we're gonna put it on our own lens anyway. Um, so
Well,
yeah,
yeah, we
like
can't speak to stuff we don't know, you know?
yeah, exactly. But I'm gonna primarily talk about the film because I didn't actually read the book, though I do really want to now. Like I'm interested
Mhm.
to see how it plays out. Um, it's definitely been on, like, the to be read on my Goodreads, and I probably know a few people who've read it, I just haven't. Again, we don't really do a lot of that for fun, although I am reading an eco horror book where there are special girls that are infected, which is pretty
Ooh.
called Wilder Girls, so maybe one day I'll do a review on that, but today, we're talking about Girl with All the Gifts. So, this film and the book as well follows a young girl named Melanie and her harrowing journey with her teacher, Miss Justineau, and some others. And Melanie and the other children, like her, are something different. You
Uh-huh.
kind of get that just immediately because we're introduced to them and they're strapped to wheelchairs and they're being verbally accosted by these military like guardians. But immediately you feel connected to and affectionate for Melanie. Like your heart goes out for her. Because one, it's like it's unsettling to see children treated in such a way. And they're
Yeah.
so like viscerally angry at them. Like the adults, quote unquote, like the people who are in charge, like, they
Yeah.
call them, like, abortions, they just call them all kinds of really triggering names, and it's super abusive and frightening, so you feel for these kids, "Why would they treat these kids like this?" Like,
Yeah.
kids are not deserving of this in any way, like, no matter what they had have done, like, there's nothing
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
warrant that, so
100%.
you're just like, "What?" But on top of that, just on top of, like, feeling defensive of these children and, like, you wanna protect them, there's this other level, and that's just on Melanie herself because she's really smart, and she's incredibly charming and perplexing. Like, you just really wanna know what her whole deal is, and how, like, she could be like this.
Yeah.
She's just immediately likable, I think. And so you want to know like why one these adults are being so mean to these children, but also why they're afraid of them because it definitely feels less like they're being very mean and kind of throwing around their power, but they're also pretty terrified. Like they do act very cautionary, and a lot of that aggression comes from a point of fear and
Yeah.
of not understanding and not knowing what they are. So you're like, what is going on? What is this? And I don't ever remember anyone telling me this is a zombie film. Um,
Yeah.
I was, I believe, told it was like I knew she was a special girl and it was kind of post-apocalyptic, but I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
But I do like that even unintentionally it becomes a bit of an Afrofuturism kind of tale, which is really fun because of Melanie. But you learn that she is incredibly intelligent, and you figure this out by her rapid fire recitation of the periodic table of elements just from her brain, and her answers to these like really weird brain twisters that this like
Uh-huh.
doctor gives her. She even asks her about Schrodinger's cat and things
Yeah.
like that. Like ask her to really think through these thought experiments, and you're like, why? But the kid's like, yeah, I'll do it. But the thing like about Melanie is that she's also aware that something is wrong. Like
Uh-huh.
you you get the impression that she's only ever been treated this way, like, there's never been another way, like, she didn't have a stable life and now she has this, like, this just seems like a norm, but still doesn't seem right, um,
Yeah.
and she, throughout the whole film, works to, emotionally disarm any character that interacts with her, and whether this is to convince them that she's harmless, or to manipulate them into a false sense of security so she can attack them later is the question, because Melanie and the other children aren't human. Not entirely, anyway. They're half human, half hungries. And hungries is the this film's fun word for zombies, not walkers, not whatever else people call them. What are clickers? You know,
Yeah.
um, they're hungries. And so, in this world, a cordyceps fungus, like the one that infected folks in The Last of Us, has taken hold of most of society, and we get a glimpse into what's left of the zombie society that they're living in.
Yeah.
So we get to see this military base in England where they have essentially farmed and study these children with the hopes of finding a cure.
Yeah.
However, something terrible and predictable happens in the zombie film as the Hungries get in and wreak havoc, forcing Miss Justino, Melanie, the doctor that was going to kill her for the cure, and others to flee their makeshift home. Um, and during this journey on the outside, the human characters are now forced to reconcile Melanie with being a child. Like it was so easy to just lock a door and monsterize her from the other
Yeah.
side of it, but when you're like forced to see her every day and see how charming and beautiful she is, you're like, how can I do this? And every single one of
Yeah.
those humans is like, whoa, maybe we were wrong.
Yeah, maybe these are all just children,
They're just
and we have just
children.
been horrible to
We're
them.
just the worst humans, and we are not making a good case for ourselves, which is the
Yep.
whole thing for this. So through her charm and innocence, they learn to trust and care for her, and they start to see her as more human than hungry. But she is no less hungry than before. Because she is half hungry, Melanie has some sort of superpower because of this. Like she can move among the hungries without being harmed. Hungries don't eat their own kind, one soldier had explained. So she becomes this troop's like one tool for survival, finding them safe routes along the way to help in providing insight into the nature of the Hungries as well, to help them feel safe and kind of harbor them to like shuttle them to a safer area, supposedly. Um, but there's like this allowance to be true to herself that ignites a flame in Melanie. Because, like I said, she's half human, so she's proving the humanity side to them, but she's also discovering the bigger part of her that isn't human when she's
Yeah.
alone with herself. So, in these moments where she's alone and she's going out to like find these safe routes or figure things out, she's like searching for food or whatever. She has the opportunity to take in the world around her and understand her place in it. So, she sees the fear the Hungries invoke in the humans and realize that it's similar to the fears that they have about her. But she doesn't understand that fear because she thinks I'm totally normal. There's nothing wrong with me. And there's continually like this question of like her humanity and if she is alive, like in the traditional sense of like what we view humans as being alive. Like she definitely is alive, but there's just this whole question of like, are you real, or are you just like an intelligent zombie, right? Like, are you still
Yeah.
performing the tasks of this parasite that's linked to you, or are you an individual? Which is
Yeah.
like, honest, I mean, are we all? We're all just operating as zombies who just parrot all the tasks and things that we need to do. Spoiler alert. But it's just a
Capitalism.
little more obvious when she's a zombie. But the whole time they're trying to like prove that she is more than that, and she's like, no, I am hungry still, and that thankfully, I am because y'all would be dead.
Yeah,
Um,
right?
so you're welcome. But on the surface, this is a story about a girl coming of age and finding her power. It's also about the next generation of life persevering, evolving, and prospering in the world despite the condition they've inherited it in. It's
Yeah.
about the earth leaving us behind, and it's about Black liberation. So it's gonna get crazy on the goals. Here we go. I'm about to get into um spoiler central, and I'll give a big spoiler alert. So definitely check out this film. If you haven't, it's such a good film. Like it's totally worth your time. Pause here, go watch it, come back later. I want like you need this ending to hit you the way that it does when you don't know it's coming. Because you're gonna
Yeah.
get led down a very specific path, and then you're gonna be like, "What?" Um, so highly recommend, please do. But there when I have to get into spoiler central because there are some really important themes in this film that really revolve around the ending and some of the things that occur that are kind of like reveals. Um, for one, the in the book, Melanie is a white girl. And in fact, she is a quintessential white girl with skin as white as snow, blue eyes, and blonde hair, while Miss Justineau, however, is a black woman with skin so dark she was like her own shadow, is what the book says. And one day I will probably do a whole review on how people of color and black people are described in books one day.
Yeah.
So we're just gonna, I won't go into that right now, but I'm gonna put
Just
a
put it out
pin
there.
in
It's
it.
gonna happen.
Put a pin in that. Cause what? Um what edit? It's fine. Okay. Um I just like read something. It was like Stephen one of Stephen King's more recent books, and it still was a problem. And I was like, how is this happening? Anyway, in this film, they decided to cast the phenomenal young actress Senia Nanua, and she is a black girl. And so, like Night of the Living Dead and She Never Died, which we've covered, by casting a black person lead in their film, the directors and creators have greatly changed the narrative. They completely changed it, whether that's intentional or not. Like Romero didn't know, like, it didn't intend to have his film be as racially impactful. Um, as it was, and it perhaps it wouldn't have even been as impactful if it had not been released at the same time that Dr. King was assassinated. So, like, you don't always know that when you're going in, but it is important to discuss. Like, when you put a black person in a film, it does change the narrative. It changed the impact of things. It's like uh, Sade Sellers,
Uh-huh.
when we had her on our show, and she talked about how I Know What You Did Last Summer, like the first
Mhm.
one, if it were black kids who were having to deal with that, it would go a very different way. Like
Yeah.
their motivations for wanting to cover up that hit and run would be a lot different than what these white kids were going into. So it just comes with like the territory of putting black people into it. But it's also like, again, we're coming into this with like our American lens. So
Uh-huh.
our black culture is a little different. But that doesn't mean you can't like take and be affected by a film with a message like this
Yeah.
and kind of put that over things that are happening in your own world. So I think that this film has really evolved into some interesting discussions. So, spoiler alert. It's
It's
happening. It's
happening.
happening. So get out if you're not ready for it. And then welcome back. Melanie, on her journey with the humans, encounters a tower of spores. These spores could end the world, she is told, because they house the parasite that has changed humanity into to the hungries. And the amount of them and the way that they would spread through the air means that everyone would be infected. And for humans, that equals the end of everything.
Yeah.
Like, then we'd all be the parasites. That's a bad thing.
Yeah.
And the same parasite lives within Melanie and the other children that were born from infected mothers. And the in the children in this like new generation, the parasite has learned to live with the host, like along with the host, and evolved to this like happy medium where the host isn't a mindless drone that's just like eaten. But
Yeah.
also has like instead has control of its body and mind unless it's introduced to human flesh and then nature kicks in. But
Yeah.
like, we
Or
all
just
been.
flesh in general, actually, because they have cats that
Oh, yeah, yeah. Which
are
is, like, a good
consumed.
point because they don't get changed. Animals don't change because that's what they're gonna end up having to eat anyway. Um,
Yeah.
spoilers. Melanie finds a new group of children who intend to eat her human captors, I mean friends, and she immediately tries to help, proving her humanity and compassion. But she also discovers a power in this moment. She interacts with the kids, and because she is this hybrid who is both monster and intelligent human, she can lead them. She shows them through force and wit that she is the alpha. Like, and I use that term loosely because that's not real. Alphas
Yeah.
aren't real, but she's the leader.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to convey. And after this encounter, Melanie and her friends are attacked by the doctor, who none of us ever trusted, it was messing things up this whole time, uh, is dying from
Yeah.
an infection and wants to complete their life's work, which is to find a cure to save humanity. They want to, go down in history as a person that saved everyone. And maybe that's not even the motivation. It's like so many people you know and love have died or been changed. And that is really devastating. And wanting a cure is totally reasonable. As we discussed in the Last of Us episode, like when you're presented with one life for all of humanity to be alive, it's a really
Yeah.
tough decision for a lot of
Yeah.
people to make. Like if you're really put into that situation, what would you do? And in this, that's exactly what it's like. So the doctor wants to find a cure, and the way to do that is to actually kill Melanie. Um, and it's like, what is one kid for everyone? Um, and while this like whole interaction is happening, where the doctor is pleading with her, trying to reason with Melanie, like you care for them now, like you care for all the people, like we care for you, and so don't
In
you care?
quotes.
But yeah, we care for you. We performed care for you, and don't you care for them so much that you want to save them? And Melanie asked right out, she just said, "Are we alive? Are me and those other kids alive?" Like this whole question that you've had this whole time of that, like, are we valid humans essentially? Like, do we
Yeah.
matter? Um, and the doctor says, yeah. And Melanie then gives one of the most amazing responses in horror and any other media I've seen by saying, then why should it be us who die for you? Which like, that line, we were, like, floored. Like, we were watching it,
Yeah.
I was like, "Did you just hear?" I was like, "What?"
Yeah,
Because
that
it's not
never
what you're it's
happened.
not what you're expecting. Because like, that whole
Yeah.
time you are like, she does really care for Miss Justineau, and she is so sweet, and there is a little parts of her that are, but, like, you feel like, "Oh, she's so smart, she would understand, she's saving the whole world." When you saw the tower, you thought, "Oh, no, don't let anything bad happen with that." Like, your instinct is to be like, "People be saved." We have to save people, always, like, we're people, we want the people saved. So for when she says that, you're like, you're right. Why?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of layers to that. So I'll try to be as concise as possible because I feel like there's like two really big messages, and then within one of them, there's like other
Yeah.
interpretations. So one of these is that there's an eco horror element to the story that plays well into the monstrous femme coming of age tale that Melanie is going through. Because she is the next evolutionary step of humanity, not the undoing of it completely. The world has
Yeah.
changed enough that humans cannot stay as they are and live. Later, after setting the spores on fire and in doing so dooming the world to be hungries, Melanie interacts with a soldier who, over this like whole interaction, slowly starts to care for her, but he was a total douche the
It's
whole
so
time until
rude,
that. Like,
yeah.
how dare you even try to make it like we should care about you? Anyway, he cries out and he says, "It's all over now." To which Melanie says the second best thing in horror and other films. She says, "I'm sorry, Sergeant. I'm so sorry. It's going to be all right. It's not over. It's just not yours anymore." And I was like, okay, this film is about this film is eco horror. It is about the world leaving us behind.
Yeah.
Because at this point, like she really is genuinely sorry. Like there is it's not, I wouldn't say remorse, like she's not regretting. She's just
Yeah.
sorry that that's what it has to be. Like
Yeah,
she's sorry
like, she
that he
understands the implication of what
yeah.
it is.
Like everyone's gonna die. I see that. I totally hear what you're saying. And that's a bummer. That's a bummer, man. Like, oof, that's rough. That's rough,
Yeah.
buddy. But but also but also, why should we die for you? Who are you?
Sweetie, why should we die for
First of
you?
all, you're old. Ew. Okay, you're old. Second of all, you did this. You and all the people like you did
Yeah,
this.
you made
This
the
is
planet
your
mad, so the
fault.
spores happened.
This is your fault. So I'm sorry, not sorry. So she's like, she is sorry that this is happening to them, just not so sorry that she would sacrifice herself and her people for a race of people that would never show her the same mercy. They would never do that.
Yeah,
And
they did
so
nothing but horrible to her the entire time.
the entire time they've like villainized her and the people around her and just they only hurt her. They've only hurt her by casting her as this other. And she is just like a young, like if you just think about it, like think about like young people who are really sad about the the condition of the world. You think that young people, if they were given the option to be like, okay, all the old people, like even me included, like
You go to
we're
space,
getting up
don't come
there. They
back.
have to go to, yeah, go to space. Something happens to them. All old people are gone now, and we get to fix things. Like you don't think they'd be like, yeah,
Yeah,
say
100%.
less.
Because
So
otherwise I'm just gonna do drugs, so
yeah, like, I'm just gonna be sad because you've ruined the world enough that I can't live
yeah.
here anymore, so whatever. So there's this whole level of it being eco horror, this whole level of her being this monster that is now this evolutionary step forward, for humanity, alright? Again, she's not erasing humanity, she's making it better. She is of the better who can adapt to this now new society, and because all the spores turn humans into hungries anyway, it's not like they're ever gonna eat humans again. The humans are gone, so they're only eating animals. So you're just people more. You're still people
Yeah,
again.
you're
Like
still
you
doing the
took
same
out the
thing.
one thing that they were mad about, which is that you eat people, and now that's gone. It's not okay. Anyway, there's a whole other level to this. So let me get into that before before this whole episode just me like ah. So however, by casting this young black woman, the narrative has become deeper than just that of the evolutionary next step generation leaving us behind. It becomes a conversation about black liberation. And in a phenomenal article that Kat found on Afropunk titled The Girl with All the Gifts and Black Girls Destroying the World to Save Themselves by Hari Ziad, they explain this impactful shift of narrative and the impact it has on the ultimate goal of the story. Considering how often us schools are disappointed by films that pull their punches and don't commit to revolution, it is safe to say the ghouls really love this film. So Zaid says, I'm not sure the filmmakers made this switch to purposely reinforce ideas of Black revolution. Indeed, the close up of Miss Justineau crying as she's trapped in a tiny room as the last human being Melanie keeps alive at the end for the purpose of continuing to teach the other zombie children seems to be included to invoke a feeling of sympathy. White women are always the most ideal victims. If one sympathizes with Justineau, as a white audience might, and as I believed was intended, the film becomes less a triumph and more a tragedy. This is the tragedy we are told would happen if Black folks really were to destroy the world and humanity for our own sakes. We don't have the tools to police ourselves, or we are too good to be so heartless, or we don't need saving in the first place because eventually things will naturally work out if only we were a bit more patient or respectful, or respectable. Interpreting this as a tragedy tells us that Melanie should have waited for a way to save herself and the other humans, even if there was no promise of that way ever existing. Even if waiting meant passing up just saving herself, even if the humans had no interest in compromising in return. F that. We are not white audiences. It is time we stop pretending as if we need them. It is a time a black girl destroyed the world, destroyed humanity, destroyed society to save herself. And it is time we cheered them on when they tried and succeed. And that's exactly what I felt like when
Yeah.
I was like, and again, because part of it is like, okay, this young girl is leaving the old ways behind and again evolving past, but honestly the fact that it was, you know, to have like her say, then why should it be us who die for you? It just hits differently when it's uttered by a young black girl to an older white woman, period. It just,
Yeah.
it's like I don't care where you are in the world, like you're gonna see that and be like, wait a second. um and it's really just that, right? It's just like that is representative of all the times when people have been told to behave or like don't match the energy, right? Like you have to rise above, you gotta be better than that, you gotta be quiet. Um,
Yeah.
saying that violence isn't the answer for a lot of things, whereas like, okay, 400 plus years of violence on them, why not? Why not?
Yeah.
Like, who are you to say now that it's violence isn't the answer now that it's our answer, but it was the answer for everybody else. And
Yeah, like,
so
why do I have to be the better person in this
yeah,
scenario?
exactly, and that's 100% what that very weighted sentence means when it is this young black girl saying it instead of just like who Melanie was written to be, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, the result isn't all positive though, because some people have mixed feelings about the switch and like that interpretation, kind of similar to what Ziad was saying. So the fact that like this race swapping of the primary characters of Melanie and Justino could have a different interpretation that's also harmful. Because if you do interpret Melanie as not the hero, but instead the villain, as Ziad explains, they felt like that was the intent because like she's pretty much like villainized. Um, and if you do see Miss Justino as the victim
Yeah.
at the end, then it wouldn't have the same empowering impact, right? It's gonna hit a different
Yeah.
audience in a different way. Um, but yeah, it with this instead of a young black girl taking the power back from the oppressors, it becomes she's a monster. And in
Yeah.
the book, having Miss Justino be not only the most caring, compassionate, and human in the story, but also having her be a dark-skinned black woman is also powerful. Having Melanie be this idyllic little white girl who ultimately brings down all of humanity can be interpreted as like European colonialism,
Yeah.
especially like it's in England. Let me tell you, they've been doing that. And instead of fighting against oppression, it becomes a desire to recreate the world in her image, a very Aryan image, mind you. Um, she is described in that book. So it could really twist like how you're looking at it. Like you can see is like trying to make Miss Justino the white victim is gives you a different point of view than the strength that Miss Justino has in the book. Although, if it does end in the same way, then I can't say that I enjoy the idea of a black woman being caged to
Yeah.
continue to cater to young white people. Does not sound good.
Yeah.
But if Melanie is the villain, then that just confirms the villainy of it, but still not a great image. Not a great image. So I'm gonna stick with the Miss Justino from the film being in there. And so I wonder how you interpret it, Ghoul Scouts, and I wonder how it affects you. Like, do you see Melanie as a monstrous femme? Perhaps you see her as a representation of white fear of Black people finally fighting back against oppression in a way of equal violent force, of which they've been oppressed under. If we choose to see Villainy. Like giving her own nickname. If we choose to see Melanie as a hero, an evolutionary next step, even simply a child inheriting the earth, can we then root for her in the end? And can we celebrate with her as she teaches and molds the next generation into superhumans?
Yeah. Superhuman time. It is your time now. Yeah, no, that's super real. And I want to read the book, honestly. Like I want to read it because I feel like there's so much. I don't know if it'll hit like different because I get like what the author was maybe trying to say.
Hmm.
I also like just don't know enough about the author too to like know if like should they be saying
Not, yeah, not, but also
that.
it's like, again, it's England. There's like different, I'm sure there's different connotations and different feelings behind it.
Yeah.
That the, like, writer's original intent was, and I didn't even bother looking into it. It's like, my part is already long enough. I can't also be like,
Yeah.
"Here's what the book's about," and then it'd just
Yeah,
be here
maybe
for
one day we'll cover the book. We'll figure it out. We'll
yeah.
see. I mean, honestly, we write our own stories, so let's go.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
do it. We make the decisions here. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's like we're in charge of ourselves as well. Uh,